the shortest day of the year, and now it's going to start getting lighter and lighter and lighter. And that's why, probably, we celebrate the birth of Jesus Christ, that great teacher, at this time of the year. Because it is when the light is returning. And what way for humans to understand that the light is returning than to celebrate it in the birth of one through whom so much light was revealed. So Christmas, Christ Mass, the birth of the Christ, truly is a celebration of light. And for those of us who've been here all month, what we are celebrating this month is being awake to light. And so today is part one of sort of this culmination of being awake to light, where we talk about some meanings for this thing called Christmas, and especially this thing called the Nativity story of Jesus the Christ. And then I really want to do a plug for you to all come, as Adina said, tomorrow night, because this is the day you'll hear about it and continue contemplating it for yourself. And then tomorrow night is when you actually can physically claim it and integrate it and bring it into you. You know, as human beings, we hear and listen and take things in, but there's some power that comes when we get to claim it. And so if your time includes it, I would say be here tomorrow, and if not, you can certainly join us in consciousness for what we're going to be doing here tomorrow to claim our light. So, Christmas time, those who grew up in the Christian tradition celebrate this birth of Jesus with this quite interesting story that most scholars now think was really totally made up. And it was totally made up because the people in the early, I will say, Jesus sects of Judaism, because that's what it was. Within Judaism, there were now these sects of people who worshiped Jesus as the Messiah. They were trying to woo the Romans and Greeks. So what did the Romans and Greeks have? These stories of gods fornicating with humans and having people like Hercules and people with strength. And so they felt like to get these Romans and Greeks on the same page in the game, to get them on board, they needed to create this wonderful story to say, you got to check this guy out. He was no mere mortal. You know, in fact, they probably said that, just like in the Superman TV show. No mere mortal he. And so they created this quite wonderful story. And the thing is, the fact that the story is not factual doesn't matter, because the story is true. And I will always be grateful to Joseph Campbell, who tells us that this is what myth is. It is not factual, but it is pointing to something that is deeply true within ourselves. So today we're going to look at the story and see how it really is the spiritual hero's journey. Joseph Campbell talks about the hero's journey and how Homer in the Odyssey, what he goes through are steps we go through in our own lives. And the Christmas story, the Nativity story, actually represents parts of us on our spiritual journey. So that's what we're going to take a look at today, to see the truth in it for us and see if you can kind of recognize little pieces of you on this thing called waking up to our spiritual magnificence. But first, we need to be sure that we're all on the same page with our definition of Christ. Because Christ, those of you, forgive me, those of you who remember, you've heard me say this before, Christ was not Jesus' last name. In fact, Jesus wasn't even born the Christ. He woke up into it, because Christ, which means the anointed one, the Messiah, really refers to a principle. And it is a principle of consciousness, a consciousness that knew its unity with God, with the infinite, with the whole enchilada that is the universe. That Jesus became the Christ because he knew who he truly was. He talked about it as the Son of the Father. But the Father and I are one. And for each of us, so too are we the children of the Most High. And we wake to that. We wake to that deeper and deeper knowing of ourselves as the Christ, of ourselves as expressions of that one, which is God, which is love, which is peace, which is joy. And each year we celebrate, in this new thought tradition called religious science or science of mind, we celebrate Christmas not just to give thanks for this wonderful teacher, but to remind ourselves of what is continually trying to be born in us, wanting to be born in us. And it is that truth of us that in that carol that's sung actually before Christmas time, O come, Emmanuel. Because Emmanuel means God with us. Not out there somewhere, but God with us. And then we take that extra step and say, God within us. That is the Christ. So let's review the highlights of the Nativity story. I tried to fit it in there, but you're very lucky that I'm not going to take the time to show you that I still remember Luke 2 from reciting it as a child, but we're not doing that this year. So don't get me started. So the story, we won't start with where the story begins with John the Baptist, so don't worry about that. But the Nativity story part begins with a pregnant woman named Mary and her husband Joseph. And they are making their way on a donkey to Bethlehem, the city of Joseph's origin, of his family, so they can pay their taxes. They go to stay overnight. She's ready to give birth any moment. They go and looking for inns to spend the night, and there's no room at the inn. So they finally find, somebody says, hey, I got a stable out back you can stay in. So they are in a stable, and that's where the baby Jesus is born. They put him in a manger of straw. There are shepherds. No, Liz, don't go there. Abiding in the field. There are shepherds out in the field, and they see this star that they have never seen, this great star, and they're wondering, what the heck is that? And then this angel appears to them and tells them that a Savior has been born, and they will find it in a manger. So they go check it out and see the baby. And then we know the story continues with 3 wise men who have come from the Orient, from the East. And then we also find out in one of the stories that Herod, who was the king, who had been told that this Savior was coming that would end his reign, that he's told the wise men to come and report everything to him, and they kind of caught his stuff, so they returned home another way. Did not go back to Herod, because Herod wanted to nip this thing in the bud, and I won't tell you what that means. And of course we have all along that star that is guiding everyone to find where Jesus has been born. So, taking some of these elements of the story, let's see how they reflect different pieces in us as we do this thing called the spiritual walk. First of all, Mary, she is the actual vessel for the birth of this physical being who who becomes the Christ, so are each of us a vessel for that Christ presence. We are each the vessels for God to be birthed and keep on birthing and keep on birthing. Isn't it wonderful we don't have to gain weight? However, I would say that most of us experience labor pains from time to time, especially if we're doing our work. But let me tell you, it isn't the same. But we do experience labor pains. So that is who each of us is. Mary being a vessel for birthing something wonderful into the world. Joseph, what a guy. What a guy. I mean, the story tells us that she became pregnant before they even got married. And what a guy. What a guy to just say, wasn't me. Wasn't me. To marry her anyway. To hear her say, well, actually, I've been impregnated by God. And to say how embarrassing, how inconvenient, and probably not even understand what? And still support her, marry her, keep her make an honest woman of her. And that part of us that in the spiritual journey, we sometimes need to be faithful to what we don't understand. That we need to trust as we see that something is coming from God, that we need to trust, that we need to cooperate and support what is wanting to happen in us. And sometimes it is inconvenient. And sometimes it's embarrassing as our ego doesn't like some of the things we feel guided to do or become or let go of. But if we are faithful, we are like Joseph, trusting and supporting that which wants to find birth with us. Now, the whole no room at the inn thing. We all have experience with this, that we get so full of what we think we're supposed to be doing. We get so full of our intelligence or our own bright ideas or our perspective on things or just the stuff we have to do, the demands of life, that we often have no room for that whispering of spirit. As Jesus articulated it later, I stand at the door and knock. Not bang, bang, but knock. That spirit whispers and knocks. And if we are so full in our minds of all our stuff, there is no room. If we are full of resentment and grudges against people in our past, there is no room in our heart for that love of God and those whisperings of spirit. All of us fall into that. And it's just the reminder. Make room. I mean, how do you think that innkeeper felt? Yeah, you didn't have room to have the Son of God born. How are you feeling about it now? You don't want to be that. I could have made room. Yeah. Then probably my favorite element, metaphor, and so many of us talk about this, ministers talk about this, is the fact that in this story, even though, they're trying to make it all that this is this amazing person, which it was, that he was born in a manger. And manger is kind of a the manger had the little straw. And so we think of that in our little creche scenes, and that's really pretty. But we sort of forget what was all around that manger. Poop. And animals. And they probably didn't in those days realize, that you need to get that stuff out of the way. And so they probably didn't clean it a lot. And so this person who the whole purpose of the story is to get us to realize his magnificence is born in, frankly, forgive my French, pretty crappy surroundings, literally. And this is that wonderful gift. Because so many times we do stuff, we've done something in the past we're ashamed of, and we carry this in our heart. And it is this that makes us think we don't have room because we're not worthy. And this part of the story is reminding us that if the light can come into the world in this kind of surrounding, that it doesn't matter who we've been, what we've done, what we haven't done. That the light, that Christ light comes alike to all, can be birthed anywhere, anywhere, in anyone and in everyone. So no matter what junk you're carrying forth, it doesn't matter, because you are a fit vessel, a birthing place for that consciousness of God. Don't you forget it. Now the shepherds, they're out watching the sheep and guiding and guarding and protecting. And so similarly, do they represent that part of us, which is guiding and guarding and protecting those thoughts, the guardians of ourselves. And they see this star, and the angels come to them and tell them, you've got to check this thing out. And there comes to many of us a time when we get called to go deeper into our divine selves. And the shepherds, I never thought about this before till I was looking at it recently. The shepherds left their sheep to go find the Christ child. And sometimes we have to leave the stuff of our life in search of our true divinity. Sometimes we have to leave a relationship. Sometimes we have to leave work. Sometimes we just have to leave an aspect of life as we have known it, to really go in search of the divine within. But the thing to remember is, then having encountered it, the shepherds go back to their sheep. They've probably been changed. But we are not asked to leave all of our life and go in a monastery. If you notice that, notice I'm not in a monastery. Most of our practitioners do not go into monasteries. So we can go back to our lives and in fact bring that Christ light, that knowing of who we truly are, back into our everyday lives. But sometimes the spiritual journey causes us to go away, and then we return new. Then there are the angels. And the angels represent those high thoughts, those inspiring thoughts, those messages that our ego everyday mind doesn't seem to usually tell us. Have you noticed that it's usually not our ego that whispers, you are the divine? No, they said, you forgot to do that. You ate too much last night. That's ego. So the angels, the messages from on high, or the messages from our highest self, can come at any moment. Sometimes in a conversation with a friend, sometimes your friend is actually an angel because they say something that sparks something in you. Or they reflect back to you a part of yourself that you've been kind of wanting to know was so, but maybe didn't trust it, and your friend says, oh, I see this in you. And then you have more permission almost to become it. Or you read a book and something jumps out at you that that just clicks and opens you up. And sometimes it's just in your meditation and contemplation. When we make room in our thoughts and in our heart, that a new idea, a higher thought, that will be our saving, that will bring us to a new awareness, to new joy, will come. So we all have angel moments in our lives that are those messages. We would say messages from God from that highest place. Then we have the wise men. And it is significant in the story that they came from the east. Not just so we could sing, we three kings of Orient are, and talk about cigars, traveling, make up new words for it or something. But the east represents, and there's still hints of it today, sort of what is occult, which means hidden. And so the wise men, because they came from the east, have this with them, this idea of being a hidden knowledge, a hidden wisdom that we would say is really that which is hidden within us, that splendor, that magnificence that is waiting to be released, that is just waiting within us to be released. And then we just kind of have to mention Herod because he was trying to, as I said, nip this thing in the bud and probably really find out so that he could have the baby murdered. Herod represents that part of us, that small part of us, that when we start getting those high thoughts, when the angels start waking us up to who we truly are, the small self says, no, that's dangerous. People will think you're weird if you go talking about the fact that right within you God is. Let's not go there. Let's shut that down. So we all have a little bit of Herod in us that gets afraid, that's small-minded. But we can go as the wise men did, go another way. We don't have to, just like, even though Herod was the king, and sometimes it feels like we're ruled by our ego and our small self, the wise men found another way. So we also can find another way. And we can find another way because of what the star represents in that story. That star that, again in the story, that the wise men followed from way far away. That star is that which illuminates us, wakes us up to truth, that guides us. That is the light that reveals that hidden wisdom, that hidden knowing that is within us. So that star is available to each of us to guide, to reveal, to awaken us up. So you see, all of us have this rich nativity story constantly going on, this birthing. Years ago, hundreds of years ago, Meister Eckhart, who was a great mystic who was eventually excommunicated because he was teaching things that weren't quite in alignment with the church of the day. But he said, I love to quote this every year because the first time I saw this, his understanding just blew me away. He said, what good is it to me if the Son of God was born to Mary 1,400 years ago? So I love, only 14, well, how about 2,000? 1,400 years ago, what good is it If the Son of God was born to Mary 14 years ago, if it is not being born in my person, in my time, in my culture, what difference does it make to know this historical fact, which was, taken as fact then, this historical fact, what difference does it make if it is not being born in me? And so that is why we go through this story every year. That is why when people say, well, why do people in Science of Mind celebrate Christmas? I don't get it. Because it is a reminder of a bigger truth that Jesus, his birth, and even this mythical story pointed the way to. Something to be born in us. And something that happened before the Nativity story that many of you know is when the angel came to Mary and presented her with this idea. Hey, guess what? God has chosen you. You're going to birth the Messiah. She was, say what? She said yes. She said yes. And that yes was the first thing that had to happen for the baby to grow in her. So we kind of circle around to back before the story. We must say yes. God does not force his way in, its way in, her way in. The infinite, the divine, does not force its way in. We have to be the ones to say yes. To be the Christ, to step into the light that each of us was meant to be. The truth of who each of us was meant to be. We need to be the ones to say it. And then to step in and own, this is the truth of who we are. And then share that light. Share that light of Christ, that light of our knowing of the truth of our spiritual magnificence, who we truly are. And many of you have been contemplating all month since we started Got a Light? To say, what is that particular light that is each of yours? What is the light of God in all the different qualities of God that we can think of? What is the one that is up to you to shine? I've been asking you to contemplate that all month. And so tomorrow night, we will each have an opportunity to claim that light, to claim it. And again, if you can't be here tomorrow, know that that's what we're doing between 7 and 8, so you can join us in consciousness, although I really would love you to be here. But be with us in consciousness to declare that, because when we declare a thing, we know the power of our word in this teaching, power of the word to make it so. So there's a big invitation to move through this story ourselves, to move through especially the parts that don't want to hear, the parts that get distracted, to open up and make room for that birth every year, but right here and right now. You can do it every day, but with the collective, it's so powerful to do it now, do it this year, to claim that Christ in you, to be born in you this day. So I welcome you. I celebrate with you. And I know who you are. You are the Christ. Let's pray. So I am so grateful for a story told and told and told and told so many times that it was finally written down. that is a truth trying to make itself known. And in this moment, in my time, in my person, knowing that there is but one life, that life which is God, that life which is pure spirit, that life which is the infinite, knowing that there is but one life, I say yes to it being born more powerfully, more truly, more fully, more deeply in my person. I choose to recognize more fully my oneness with the all that is, and in that knowing, I am able to be more loving than I thought I could be, more compassionate than I thought I could be, more wise than I thought I could be, more capable than I thought I could be, able to move into peace more easily than I thought I could, more abundant, more joyful, and more grateful than I thought I could be. Because I know there is something greater in me waiting to make itself known, waiting to be revealed, waiting to be birthed. And so once again, I claim this birth of God as me. And for each and every person here who wants to be included in this prayer, I celebrate again the birth of God as each of us. And I know that as we say yes, as we make room, as we are faithful even if we don't quite understand it, as we leave behind what needs to be left behind, we make room, we let go of any ideas of unworthiness, as we open up to those high thoughts, those messages, to that wisdom, as we follow the light of inspiration that leads us to that center within each of us. We become the Christ, and we become a blessing on earth. I am so very grateful for Christ Mass in me, and so it is.